Welcome back to the channel Movie Creepers. Today we will dive into the world of some top 10 gruesome Cenobites from Hellraiser comic universe. The labyrinth stretches into eternity, a realm where pain is worshipped and suffering is sacred. Within its shadows dwell the Cenobites, twisted disciples of Leviathan, each sculpted by torment and bound to inflict it upon others. From the flesh-stealing face Cenobite to the cursed Fulgur and the monstrous ferryman, their tales are woven in blood. Some, like Easioli and the sculptress, sought hell willingly, while others, like Sister Flagellum, exist only to serve Leviathan's dark will. Each Cenobite has a purpose, a story of agony and transformation. In the end, all belong to the labyrinth. Before we jump into the exploration, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on future videos. Thank you. Let's begin. What are Cenobites? Before we delve deeper into the topic, let's first understand who exactly are the Cenobites and where do they come from? In the Hellraiser franchise, Cenobites are a group of extra-dimensional beings who are essentially torturers, often heavily mutilated and adorned with body piercings, who can be summoned by solving a puzzle box called the Lament Configuration, and are known for their sadomasochistic tendencies, with their leader usually being the iconic character Pinhead. They are not exactly demons from hell, but rather beings from another dimension who have transcended physical pain and pleasure, viewing extreme suffering as a form of enlightenment. Cenobites are recognizable by their grotesque body modifications, including pins, hooks, and other disturbing mutilations, often wearing fetishistic leather outfits. Their primary function is to inflict extreme pain and pleasure on humans who summon them through the Lament Configuration, often leading to their capture in the Hell dimension. 1. Face. First appearing in Clive Barker's Hellraiser No. 1, The Warm Red, the face Cenobite became a recurring character, featuring in 22 other comic issues. Leonidas Frank Chaney, better known as Lon Chaney, was an American actor from the early 18th century, renowned for his incredible versatility. He was particularly famous for portraying tormented, grotesque, and afflicted characters. His mastery of these roles was largely attributed to his groundbreaking use of makeup. But what was his secret? Well, according to this twisted tale, Lon Chaney was no ordinary artist. He was a serial killer who skinned his victims and used their faces to enhance his performances. Chaney's horrifying craft eventually caught the attention of Leviathan, who sent Pinhead to claim the deranged actor for the labyrinth. Upon arrival, the engineer flayed Chaney's skin, leaving him only the stolen faces of his victims to wear. However, rather than being condemned to eternal suffering, he became Leviathan's personal theater performer, staging nightmarish productions for the denizens of hell. Though Lon Chaney's transformation into a Cenobite is pure fiction, history has seen its fair share of obsessive and even criminally unhinged artists. 2. Fulgur. In 1620, a boy named Robert Johnson unknowingly solved the Lament Configuration, summoning an ancient Cenobite known as Fulgur. However, instead of immediately claiming Robert, Fulgur struck a deal with his parents, Grace and Philip Johnson. If they willingly surrendered themselves to hell, their son would be spared. But the Johnsons, desperate to escape their fate, broke their pact. They fled across the ocean to America, believing they could outrun the inevitable. They were wrong. Fulgur tracked them down, dragging them to hell as punishment for their betrayal. But their defiance came at a steep cost, not just for them, but for their entire lineage. Fulgur cursed the Johnson bloodline with the sign of Leviathan, dooming every descendant to perish at the age of 25. Their damned souls were then condemned to the fields controlled by Aparius, the keeper of Hell's infernal beehives, where they were sown into the very earth. Nearly 4 centuries later, Fulgur was chosen among the Cenobites to battle Mortmam's harrowers. He pursued Murkova into combat and gained the upper hand against one of the warriors, Ron Ringwood. Just as Fulgur prepared to dismember him, another harrower, Vera Wishak, intervened, severing Fulgur's flaming hand with her supernatural boomerang. But Vera's victory was short-lived. Fulgur turned his fury toward her, forcing her to plead for aid from Leviathan's sister, Mortmam. Answering her call, Mortmam twisted Vera's own body into a weapon, turning her blood and saliva into a potent acid, deadly to Cenobites. The more Fulgur tortured her, the more his own flesh burned. In a final act of defiance, Vera spat on him, reducing him to agony and leaving him utterly powerless. In the end, the harrowers triumphed, and Fulgur, along with the other Cenobites, fell in defeat. 3. Grillard. In the year 1220, Count Carillion led his army to the lands near the eastern Mediterranean. During his campaign, he discovered an ornate puzzle box and took it back with him, unaware of the dark forces it contained. Sometime later, Father Robitaille of Carillion's parish requested an audience with Lady Carillion, warning her of the great evil he believed the Count had brought home. The two began researching the history of the mysterious artifact, convinced they could use it as a weapon against Satan himself. By 1223, Count Carillion had returned from battle, weary and disillusioned, feeling that the bloodshed and financial loss had been for nothing. Determined to rid their world of darkness, he and the Countess attempted to use the puzzle box to ward off all evil. Instead, they unknowingly summoned the Cenobite Grillard, who claimed the Count's soul and dragged him to hell. Left behind, Lady Carillion and Father Robitaille vowed to continue their battle against Satan. However, in the midst of their struggle, their partnership turned into something more. Love soon blossomed between them, and before long, the Countess found herself pregnant with Robitaille's child. A year later, the couple accidentally summoned Grillard once more. This time, there was no escape. Both were taken to hell. But fate took an even more twisted turn. Grillard had made a pact with Count Carillion, allowing him to return to Earth, but as Lady Carillion's unborn child. The Count was reborn as his own wife's son, a grotesque cycle of torment beyond comprehension. Centuries later, in 1992, a young mob leader named Carlos witnessed the terrifying power of the Lament configuration firsthand. Seeing an opportunity, he deceived his rival, Vito, into solving the puzzle. Blindfolded and unaware of what he was doing, Vito unknowingly activated the box. Grillard appeared, but instead of claiming Vito, he turned his attention to Carlos, revealing a brutal truth. It was Carlos's own greed and thirst for power that had summoned him, not Vito's unwitting hands. This revelation echoed the words of Pinhead in the Hellraiser films. Desire, not mere action, is what truly calls the Cenobites. 4. Baron. Clive Barker's Hellraiser comics, published by Epic Comics, present a very different version of creation of the Lament configuration. According to issue number 3, Lamarchand was not an unwitting craftsman but an occultist himself, one obsessed with opening a gateway between Earth and Hell. Despite his efforts, he repeatedly failed to construct a functional Lament configuration. It was only after studying the diary of the notorious 15th century serial killer Gilles de Rais that he finally succeeded. Upon solving the puzzle, Lamarchand encountered Baron, also known as the Duke of the Order of the Gash. Impressed by his work, Baron chose to spare Lamarchand's life, recognizing that a living creator could serve Leviathan far better than a dead one. While much of Lamarchand's past remains cloaked in mystery, one thing is certain: he has existed in some form since at least the 15th century, his legacy forever intertwined with the horrors of the Lament configuration. 5. Draliba. In 1992, a woman named Ezioli grew disillusioned with the weakness and cowardice she saw in humanity. Seeking something greater, something beyond the limitations of Earth, she set out to uncover the secrets of Hell. Her pursuit of darkness led her to commit murder, carving open her victim and removing his organs. This gruesome act unlocked a gateway to Hell itself, from which emerged the Cenobite known as Draliba. Ezioli expressed her desire to enter Hell, but Draliba denied her request, coldly declaring that she lacked what was necessary to become a Cenobite, or even to set foot in the labyrinth. Undeterred, Ezioli committed another murder the very next night, determined to prove her worth. When Draliba appeared again, he warned her that Earth offered a far better existence than the torments of Hell. However, his words were not entirely honest. He had become captivated by her beauty, secretly watching her as she slept. Days passed, and Easioli finally acquired the lament configuration. It was then that Draliba realized she would never stop in her pursuit of hell. But something within him had changed. He had fallen in love with her, and for the first time, he questioned Leviathan's grand design. In an act of ultimate defiance, he proposed a trade. They would swap places. Easioli, thrilled by the chance to enter hell, accepted without hesitation. But as Draliba stepped into the mortal world, he was overcome by the crushing weight of his decision. The land of the living was not the freedom he had imagined. It was a prison of regret, a mistake from which there was no escape. 6. The Ferryman. During the 1930s, a man named Harmon Taylor, a politician and high-ranking member of the Ku Klux Klan, was said to have hidden a fortune, a long-standing legend within the Taylor family. But Harmon's legacy was far darker than mere treasure. Taylor purchased a boat and refashioned it into a floating house of horror, naming it the Dixie Shadow. Under the cover of night, he led the vessel on terrifying midnight raids, abducting people of color and forcing them into brutal gladiatorial combat aboard his ship. While fresh victims were brought in regularly, the true spectacle was always reserved for the final match against a monstrous fighter known only as the Ferryman. A devout disciple of pain, the Ferryman possessed inhuman strength, capable of crushing skulls with his bare hands. One fateful night, the crew of the Dixie Shadow stumbled upon a peculiar artifact, the lament configuration. What followed remains a mystery. By morning, the Dixie Shadow was found adrift, its entire crew inexplicably vanished, save for a single mentally disturbed child. Left abandoned on shore, the Dixie Shadow soon became a derelict ghost ship. Locals claimed it was still seen gliding through the waters on foggy nights, and each time it appeared, another person mysteriously disappeared. Decades later, in 1992, Sam Boyd, a former Klan member and senatorial candidate, became obsessed with the legend of Taylor's lost fortune. His racist views had made securing campaign funding nearly impossible, and desperation drove him to seek out the Dixie Shadow himself. After an exhaustive search, he finally discovered the ship. Among its decayed remains, he also found the lament configuration. The moment he solved the puzzle, the true horror of the ship's past was revealed. Emerging from the darkness was the Ferryman, no longer a mere man, but a transformed Cenobite, bound to Leviathan's will. With terrifying efficiency, the Ferryman and his gash descended upon Boyd, ripping his chest open and binding his lifeless body to the ship's steering wheel, ensuring that the Dixie Shadow would sail on, forever a vessel of torment. 7. Hunger. Hunger is unusually gaunt, even for a Cenobite, and that alone speaks volumes. His pleasure lies in collecting tormented souls through the most merciless means imaginable. Unlike many of his brethren, who are named after their appearance or function within the labyrinth, Hunger's name is a direct reflection of his very nature, an insatiable, all-consuming force. Remember the story of Byron, the man who slaughtered his entire family? Hunger took his cruelty a step further, merging the corpses of Byron's victims into a grotesque, living beast, only to then feed Byron to the abomination he had unknowingly created. A twisted, nightmarish form of cannibalism, unlike anything before it. But that was merely one of Hunger's countless cruel and heartless atrocities. His existence stretches far back into history, with one of his earliest recorded appearances dating to 1528. That year, a devout priest named Padre de Bogado unknowingly summoned him, chanting an ancient incantation while relentlessly flaying his own flesh with a whip. In his suffering, Hunger was drawn to him, ensuring that the priest's agony was only just beginning. 8. Mr. Soul. Mr. Soul made his debut in a grotesquely titled comic, Dance of the Fetus. The name itself was a twisted play on dying of the fetus. He was summoned by a woman named Alice, who had been consumed by suicidal thoughts. By the time her mind reached its 210th contemplation of death, the sheer intensity of her despair was enough to call forth Mr. Soul. Ever eager to indulge in suffering, he assisted Alice in taking her own life, but his cruelty did not end there. Upon her death, Mr. Soul discovered she had been pregnant. In an act of unspeakable malice, he extracted the fetus from her womb and cast it into limbo, sealing its fate in eternal nothingness. Alice herself was dragged to hell, where she was condemned to an existence of ceaseless torment, forced to birth Cenobite offspring for eternity. Unlike most Cenobites, who bore jagged or mutilated features, Mr. Soul possessed a set of gleaming, razor-sharp teeth. Though male, his attire resembled that of a dominatrix, exuding both menace and an eerie elegance that set him apart from his brethren. 9. Sculptress. The sculptress arrives draped in a dark green dress, exuding an unsettling elegance, her beauty and poise a stark contrast to the horrors she inflicts. Victims may admire her grace in their final moments, but their next memory is one of agony, as they find themselves being carved into her latest masterpiece. The body parts she severs are repurposed as grotesque elements of her ever-growing collection. Little is known about her past life, but her obsession with art and flesh has earned her the name the Sculptress. While we could recount endless tales of her twisted craftsmanship, one story in particular captures the true essence of her depravity. Though she revels in using human bodies as raw materials, she does not hunt for them herself. That task belongs to her devoted accomplice, the Cenobite, known as the Delivery Man. He brings her fresh subjects, and while she adores him in her own Cenobite way, there is one thing about him that pains her. He has no lips, making it impossible for him to kiss her. But soon, she would discover a new kind of devotion. One day, a young masochist solved the lament configuration, sealing his fate. The Delivery Man brought him to the sculptress, believing the man would become yet another piece of her grotesque art. But something unexpected happened. The masochist fell in love with her. The more she mutilated him, the deeper his affection grew. Every cut, every slice, every agonizing moment only intensified his devotion. Amused and intrigued, the sculptress began calling him my sweet. However, she soon realized that physical pain was no punishment for him, it was a pleasure. So, she sought another method of torment. Instead of carving his flesh, she carved into his mind. And as she had hoped, psychological agony proved far more devastating. The moment he recoiled in horror and despair, she knew she had won. The sculptress's sadistic nature is rooted in how she perceives her victims, not as people, but as mere materials for her creations. To her, suffering is art, and every masterpiece must be perfected in agony. 10. Flagellum. Sister Flagellum, also known as the Watcher of the Order, is a priestess devoted to Leviathan. She resides at the heart of the labyrinth, where she remains in an endless meditative slumber, devoid of all sensation. Only when matters of great significance arise does Leviathan himself stir her from her trance, seeking her counsel. In life, Flagellum had vowed to remain chaste, preserving herself for the right man. But the right man never came. Still, desire gnawed at her, and she indulged in relentless self-exploration. When her hands failed to satisfy, she sought greater extremes, the tantric belt of Maithuna, the yoni clamp, and, finally, the obsidian rhombus phallus. It was this last artifact that granted her both ecstasy and oblivion, one final, earth-shattering climax that lasted for an entire week and ultimately claimed her life. In death, she was reborn as a Cenobite, a silent sentinel guarding the will of Hell's ruler. She remains dormant unless the labyrinth falls into turmoil, at which point she awakens to restore order. Her transformation has granted her immense strength, an unnatural resilience, and mastery over the dark arts, perhaps even immortality. Her centuries of meditation have also bestowed upon her the ability to levitate, further emphasizing her eerie, otherworldly presence. Unlike any other Cenobite, Sister Flagellum shares a direct mental bond with Leviathan, making her his most trusted seer and advisor. She is more than a servant. She is a conduit, a vessel through which the will of Hell is spoken. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. Stay tuned for more thrilling narratives and insights.